Thank you guys for those of you who don't know me. I've been living here in Vancouver, Washington for 37 years now, and I've been going on various expeditions almost the whole time that I've been living here. So let's talk about what you need to do on your trip. We're going to talk about like the who, what, why, where. I guess I left off the how. But we're going to talk about, well, how do you organize this trip? We'll cover licensing, equipment, QSLing, logging, meeting local hams, okay, so, which I always enjoy. And my goal, and I'm serious about this, I encourage you to go on your own trip. It really is a lot of fun. You have to drag, you'll see later in one of the slides where I think I have 156 pounds of stuff that I'm dragging with me, but once you get it online, it's okay. So, who is going? That sounds simple, right? But there's a lot of planning that has to go into this. Okay, who is going can be simple if you go by yourself. Then all you have to do is just make up your own schedule and go wherever you want to go. Now, I've done that in the South Pacific for the last several years. And to echo a comment that Mel made, I'm amazed at how many people need South Cook Islands for an all-time new country. People in Europe, people on the East Coast, people in Papa Yankee 7, which is the eastern part of Brazil, where some parts of the Pacific are on the opposite side of the world for them. So that can be a difficult path. So in the last several years, I've operated from the South Cooks. I've been to the Austral Islands, which there's going to be a giant expedition from there next month in the same place I operated from. And I have some pictures of that I'll show you a little later. I operated from Samoa, which I also have some pictures of. In 2018, we had this kind of joint trip with a whole bunch of guys that I think you know some of these. And we operated from Japan 8 November Yankee for one of the contests. And my last trip prior to COVID was a V63AR from Micronesia. I haven't been on a plane at all since that trip in November of 2019. So almost 2.5 years haven't been on a plane. So what about going with your spouse and family? So what happens if your spouse goes with you or your kids? Are there enough activities to keep you busy? And I left little notes that says talk about Bermuda. Bermuda is a fascinating place to visit. There's a ton of things to do there. If I lived on the East Coast, I'd go there regularly. They have something called a tourist passport, which it's not a passport. It's just something that gets you into all the attractions, and they stamp your passport like it's a real one when you go into the governor's house from the 1600s and stuff like that. Real fun place to visit. Definitely enough to keep the whole family busy. What about lengthy travel? Trying to go to the Pacific can involve overnight stays, multiple flights. You know, difficult if young children are going along. Just something to keep in mind. Diving. I had no idea. I've been to Little Cayman Island, which is Zulu Foxtrot 8. I've been there a couple times. I had no idea they have a world-class dive resort there. And world-class. It's like this is where everybody goes. I had no idea. If you're into that kind of thing, could be a fun place to visit. So what about going with other hams? Okay, this can be very complex, all right? You have to agree on where are you going, who is going, when. What do you want to do? Are you going for a contest? Are you going as strictly as a Dxpedition? I have a couple guys I've traveled with in the past who are very cost sensitive. The whole problem with these trips that I go on is airfare. If it weren't for airfare, these trips would be very affordable. But the airfare can be $2,500 or more, plus excess baggage fees, which I'll talk about. And then hopefully you got people that can get along with each other. Egos can be interesting when some of your contest operators think maybe you're not making as many contacts as they would like to see. Now, I've never had that happen. Whenever I've traveled in a group, we know we're not going to win a plaque, so we don't worry about who has the highest score. What about a schedule? When do you want to go on your trip? High and low seasons. I went to Rhodes, Greece, which is Sugar Victor 5, in November for a contest, and that's the low season. There are no tourists there, and the weather was beautiful. It was like 68 or 70 degrees during the day. It's absolutely pleasant in November, and there were no crowds, and the cost of staying somewhere is lower than high season. Hurricane season, best to avoid. Victor Papa 2 Victor, 1998. We had a whole crew set up for the contest, and it got dark. It started raining like heck. There was lightning, and we shut down the station and disconnected all the coax. And I think we lost the first couple hours of the contest before we said, okay, it's safe enough to continue. But that fall contest season, September, October, November, need to think about that. The Pacific, the location I visited in Micronesia, is one of the rainiest places on Earth, with 350 inches of annual rainfall. And it rained every day I was there. The Pacific style or the Caribbean style, where it rains like heck for a half hour, then it blows somewhere else and you get some sun. And then an hour or two later, it rains like heck for a half hour and then it goes somewhere else. But, something to consider, especially if the family's going. What about contests? These need to be reserved well in advance. Locations are very popular. They get booked up quickly. So you need to look at what's the date of the contest and maybe reserve your contest as much as a year in advance. Why are you going? What are the goals? Especially if you've never done this before. If you've never been a DX station, it's different than operating from home. If you get on CW and you call CQ, the packet robots will pick you up within a minute or two and spot you all over the world. And within a couple of minutes, you'll have a giant pileup. Are you ready for that? Can you handle it? And it's huge. It can be huge. One of the things I've learned in the last couple of years is using Fox mode on FT8, where Fox mode is very non-stressful. It's almost like a video game. It's not like CW where you're all wound up and there's 25, 30 people calling you and you're trying to pick out call signs. It's not like that. But what are the goals? This is the goal that I love. I get so many emails. I got an email from a guy in Papa Yankee 7 who must have been jumping up and down when he sent the email. He was absolutely thrilled to work me on 80 meters. I think it was for country 290 or something. So I love doing that. Give people an all-time new one or even a new band. The WARC bands are very popular, mainly because they're not on in contests. So when you get on 12 meters or 17 meters, again, you'll have an instant pileup. And of course, let's have some fun. It's a lot of work dragging all this stuff with you, but once you get there, you get set up, you're all ready to go for a week or 10 days, whatever the time frame is. Have fun, enjoy it, especially if the bands are open. And of course, you can try to win a contest category. And all the contest trips I've been on, I've actually got 2 plaques here in the shack. One of them was from Victor Papa 5, and the other was from Tango Italy 5, and they were both for the ARRL contest. In the trip to Victor Papa 5, we beat out the next station by something like 40 QSOs. And I had looked at how many QSOs do we have with the Willamette Valley DX Club, and there were like 80 QSOs. And I told the club that you guys pushed us over the top. If we didn't have those 80 Qs, we wouldn't have won the plaque. So anyway, you can try, but don't get your hopes up for that. Some of the strategy can be to enter a low power mode or a QRP mode or a 24-hour only mode, some of those. Licensing. I consider this to be a very important topic. You want to be licensed for all of these reasons. Okay. You want to operate legally. You don't want to hear a knock on your door and have the police or someone come around and say, who are you and what are you doing? Okay, you want your expedition to count for DXCC and logbook of the world. And every time I've requested a logbook certificate, I've always sent a copy of my license with that request. And then finally, I'm going to show you some licenses here in a couple of minutes. It really helps the customs officials calm down. It's like, what is all this stuff and why are you bringing this in here? Okay, so licensing is important. So how do you get licensed? Well, there's a number of answers to that. You can always contact the local ham. The gentleman I talked to in Samoa not only gave me advice, but he paid for my license fee with the assumption that I would pay him back once I got there, and I did. The people in Samoa have no way to accept payment over the internet. No PayPal, no credit card. Anyway, I mailed him a personal check, and he actually cashed the check in addition to the local ham paying for it. And they found out about that and were very apologetic about it. Contact someone who's been there. If you want to know about how to operate from French Polynesia, ask me. I can tell you about that. And then there's the telecom department. Okay, these guys are very accustomed to having temporary licenses issued for hams. They have hams coming and going all the time. So they're usually familiar with what forms you need to do. So there's quite a bit of information you likely need to provide. What equipment, what serial numbers, power output, emission modes, all this stuff. Usually you have to send the photo page of your passport and a copy of your U.S. license and whatever application they want. Here's a picture of the telecom department in the Cook Islands. These guys are super friendly. They're very easy to deal with. Okay, $20 New Zealand. You got a 1-year license. Echo 51 XXX, any 3 letters that are not currently assigned. By the way, if you see those mountains on the right side of that picture, I want you to keep that in mind. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. Here's a license from Samoa. This is the top part of it. A lot of these licenses are good from 1 year or something like that. So this was good from September 2017 to August 2018. This is the bottom part of that license. Notice it lists my Elecraft equipment and serial numbers. When I'm going through customs and the customs guy wants to know what is all this stuff, I can say, hey, I have a permit from your government that allows me to bring this into the country. And you see where it says K3 serial number such and such? Here it is right here. And there's really not much they can say at that point. It's like, obviously, I've done my work ahead of time. Here's a license from French Polynesia. This is obviously in French. This is strictly an email transaction with no fee. You send them an application, they email you back a PDF file. Okay, and again, it's got my Elecraft equipment shown, and it also has the location where I'm operating from. Rivavay, the Tama Inn in the Eels Australis, okay, and that's where that giant DXpedition is going to be next month, in the exact same spot, the Tama Inn. Here's the bottom half of that license. It says something like, this is a special temporary license, limited to 2 months, okay, so this is only for November and December 2016. If there's more than one of you going, you can request a Tango X-ray call sign. If there's just me, you get an FO stroke portable call sign. Where's this from? This is the license I used to operate from Syria 20 years ago, 21 years ago, okay? This is a group license. You might recognize some names on there. Dick Moen, N7RO, Carl, K9LA, his wife, Vicky, AE9YL, and this is a translation of that license. They were real, I don't know what the expression is. They were anxious to not just have a license request, but to have a sponsor. So the sponsor in this case is the Willamette Valley DX Club. Anyway, this license was accepted by the ARRL, and it's really one of the few times that Syria's been on the air in recent years. We talked about who and when. What about where? There are rental QTHs of hams that will either allow you to rent their shack for a fee or not, or they'll let you just operate for free. Just come and visit. That might be a good place to go. If you do that, you can get real antennas as opposed to temporary antennas. The place I stayed in the Austral Islands, was what the French call a pension, which is a bed and breakfast, which includes accommodations and meals. Now, this is what I mean by a real antenna. Here's what I used in the Cook Islands. Would you like a 20-meter monobander? Well, yes, please. Would you like a log periodic? Yes, please. On a 60-foot tower? No problem. What about an AL 1200 amp? Why, certainly. Okay, so this is what I mean by having a real shack to operate from. The equipment you see, the Elecraft and my laptop and power supply, that's all my stuff. Everything else is Andy, Echo 51A and D, who unfortunately I don't believe lives there any further. It's too bad. Here's a picture of me operating the RTTY contest from there. I worked, I think it was 36 or 38 hours, which was like one of the longest participations I've ever done in a contest. This is a picture from Zulu Fox 1 Alpha, where I've also operated from. This is an old photo. I don't know what it looks like today. Again, you could come here and operate if you want. As long as you don't want to go for a contest, you could probably go anytime you want. These guys have problems with oxidation. It's a very salty environment, and they have just lots of trouble keeping all the antennas running. What about taking your own equipment? Setting up on a beach, which I've done many times. What are we looking for in an island, in a location? I mentioned the mountain on South Cook Island. You want to be on the north side of an island, because if you're on the south side, you're looking right into that stupid mountain. That's not what you want. Okay, so you want to be on the north side of an island, as close to the water as possible. So here's an example. This is a little map of Apia, Samoa, where I operated from Viola Beach. And this is the north side of the island. By the way, this island is enormous. I don't know, it's 30 or 40 miles long. It's not a little tiny island. Here's the cottage I operated from. They've had hams there before, very friendly people. And I think it only costs like $50 a night to stay there. So other than the airfare, it was very cheap. Here's my little cottage with the couple antennas, a crank IR on the right side, and a 160-meter inverted L on the left side. And those use fiberglass masts or spider poles. This is how close I was to the water there. There's no beach here due to erosion. They put up this seawall that you can take a nice long walk on. And inside the red box, you can see the top of my 160 antenna. One of the issues I had with this location was power line noise. And there's 5 power lines right there in the photo. I was fiddling around with the K3 noise blanker DSP settings, and I was able to get rid of a lot of the noise. But that was an issue at this location. This is, excuse me, this is what Rarotonga looks like in the South Cooks, and it's an undersea mountain where the top of it sticks above the water. The other common thing you'll see here is they have a coastal road that goes all the way around the island. Very common. In the southeast, where you see Murray Beach and Tikioki Beach, that's where all the resorts are. And there are beautiful resorts there. But it's not a good radio location because you're looking right into the mountain. So my location in the northeast corner was an excellent radio location. Here's that 160 antenna, same one, as close to the water as possible, okay? And by close, I mean, it's probably 8 or 10 feet from the water. Here's a butternut vertical in the same spot with my friend Bill, N7OU, who is now a silent key. I really enjoyed traveling with Bill. It was a lot of fun. One of the problems with this butternut is all the capacitors on it got salt spray on it, and they started arcing over, and Bill had to go out and spray water on it and wipe off all the salt spray. So that's an interesting comment, something I've never had happen with the crank IR. What equipment do you want to bring with you? Again, depends on your goals. This is a huge question. Some people do 6 meter only QRP. In my QST article, which is in the February magazine, I talked about bringing most of your home station with you. Yep, that's the truth. A laptop, your radio. I bring a KPA 500 amplifier, tuner, all the stuff you need, all the cables, everything. Talk about USB radios. I modified my K3 to put in the USB interface in the rear of it and take out the RS-232. So now I can just use one USB cable to connect up and run RIDI or FT8. That was a nice change. I like that. Again, in that previous paragraph, I talked about all the stuff, but don't forget the antennas. Wide open topic. I've used a stepper crank IR and an inverted L for 160. I've recently purchased a DX Commander, and I'm going to bring that with me on my next trip. Here's my station in E51AAR. The flowers make a very nice touch, nice homey touch. All the equipment you see there fits into these two carry-on cases. So the radio, the tuner, I think most of that stuff fits in those, like a rolling business case. And I had a nice little padded case made for my KPA 500. So more on equipment to bring. The vertical antennas are wonderful. When you get a vertical antenna near saltwater, wow, does that thing work. Crank IR is a good antenna. Remember, the Crank IR has no traps, no capacitors, no coils. It's a monoband vertical antenna. And on 40 meters, it's pretty much a quarter wavelength monoband vertical. And it really just works like heck on 40. Butternut works good. As I said, I'm going to try that DX Commander on my next trip. You might ask, do you want to use a Yagi? Well, you can. You need to put it on something. You need to get it up in the air, and then you need a way to turn it. So it's a bit of a hassle, but it can be done. Spider poles are good. You need to, they're 4 feet long when they're compressed, so you need to carry them with you. And of course, all that stuff needs to be guided. I use RG8X. I bring along several rolls of RG8X and barrel connectors and so forth. I have a little UKITS SWR meter. When you're fiddling with the Crank IR, you kind of roughly set it to a band. And when you hook up the SWR meter, you see a big dip on the graph. It actually graphs the SWR, and there's a big dip in it. And then you just move the wire in or out, or the radial wire in or out, and you get that SWR to almost nothing on the frequency you want. Works good. Here's some of the stuff I travel with. So I have a golf case. The Crank IR has a tripod, a couple spider poles, more Crank IR parts, the coil for the 160 antenna, tent stakes, guy ropes, a rubber mallet, etc., etc. That all goes inside the golf case. And here's the 156 pounds of stuff I travel with. Needless to say, you will get hit with excess baggage fees, and in the case of the golf case, possibly oversized baggage fees. That's just part of the game. And I might mention this is just for one station. So if you have 2 stations, everybody's got to do their thing. Power supplies and voltages. It's absolutely critical that you look at wherever you're going, what kind of power outlets do they have and what voltages are they? And you need to bring whatever it takes to connect your equipment up in that location. If you're going to the Caribbean or Central America, you don't need to do a lot of thinking about it. Just take your stuff with you. So they have standard grounded 120 volt outlets like we have here. Pacific Islands vary. The Cook Islands use Australian plugs. French Polynesia uses European plugs. The Cook Islands have the same problem with oxidation, to the point where the AC outlets were becoming oxidized. And N7OU blew up an AC outlet when he hooked his amplifier up to it because of high resistance connections due to oxidation. So the owner the owner of the hotel came around and wanted to know, what did you guys just do? I was like, well, I'm sorry, we blew up your power outlet. Anyway, you have to look at all of your equipment and do whatever it takes to have them run from 240 volts. For a laptop PC power supply, that usually means nothing because it will automatically switch. For a KPA 500, you have to change the fuses in it and rotate the fuse block upside down. One of the things I do is I have my 240 volt outlet in the shack, and I always test my equipment before leaving to make sure it's set up correctly. So what about excess baggage fees? Yep, it's part of the game. You can figure on, I don't know, $300, $400, $500 excess baggage fees, depending on how many flights you have. So if I fly from Portland to LA, that's an excess baggage fee. If I fly from LA to Hawaii, that's an excess baggage fee. I fly from Hawaii to Micronesia, that's an excess baggage fee. That's just the way it is. Talk about the C6A trip. My friends and I went to the Bahamas on a small airplane that carried 8 or 10 people with a very small baggage allotment. And they basically said, we can't take all your stuff. Pick what you want to leave behind. So we had them leave behind a couple amplifiers. And I think they either came the next day or the second day after that. We got a call from the airport saying your baggage is here. That's just the way it is. Despite what people say, it does take time to set up this equipment. It's not likely you'll get on the air within an hour. It's certainly possible. But I arrived at Samoa at 11 o'clock at night and I was exhausted. So the last thing I wanted to do was think about antennas, but I worked on that the next morning. One of the things you can do to make your trip successful is to promote the trip. All these magazines, newsletters, and websites, they all want to hear about your trip, even if it's a minor trip. They want to hear about it. The Daily DX, DX World, DX Coffee, all these sites want to know about your trip. When are you going? What equipment are you using? What kind of antennas? Will you be looking for specific locations like Europe? Okay. Logging your contacts. I do everything in N1MM. I set it up to interface with the radio. I have it set up so WSJT automatically logs contacts into N1MM. So I have everything in one database. If I go for a contest, I usually have 2 logs in that database. One for my expedition and one for the outside the contest stuff. Uploading your contacts. Internet access in the South Pacific is extremely variable. You may not have access at all. You may have slow access. Hard to say. Other hands are very appreciative of you uploading your logs to Club Log and or Logbook regularly. When I'm on a trip, I try to do that every day, once or twice a day. Needless to say, I get emails about, I worked you on 160, but I'm not in the log. Would you please look at it? A lot of expeditions will just say, oh, just work us again. I don't do that. I look in the log and find that it's usually my fault. I miscopied a U and a V or an H and an S on CW. All right, I'll change it. I'll write the guy back, say I found your contact. So what you can do is just export an ADIF file from your logging app, upload it to Club Log. Again, they really appreciate that. And of course, you want to have that ready before you leave on your trip. So you want to contact the LOTW guys and get your certificate ready. You want to create your call sign on Club Log. Okay, and here's what this OQRS screen looks like. They have an OQRS management tool, and you just add call signs to it. I have 4 or 5 or 6 call signs in here. And you can specify in here that you do offer QSLs, and the first one's $3, whatever. You can specify all that here. QSLing, here's some of the cards from my trip. Robert Louis Stevenson Museum in Samoa. I had no idea he lived there. But not only that, he lived in that giant house, which is now a museum. Kind of fun to visit. QSLs are the final courtesy of a QSO. Do you guys remember that? Prior to Club Log, I got hundreds and hundreds of cards filling my little mailbox. And the neighbors sent me an email and were complaining and griping about it. And when I got home, I had to go through every one of those cards and manually fill it out. Luckily, with the use of Logbook, that has been reduced significantly. Also, when I look stuff up, I have to verify the QSO myself. I have to make sure it's correct and accurate. But with OQRS, all those contacts are vetted by Club Log. I know it's correct. All I have to do is print labels and send cards out. I accept donations through OQRS. On my trip to Micronesia, I think I got, I don't know what it was, $500 or $600 in donations, which I really appreciated. And that basically helped pay for excess baggage fees. So that was great. I was very appreciative of that. Meeting local hams. This is, not only do I enjoy meeting local hams, they love having visitors. Imagine you're the only ham on an island, and maybe once every 5 years somebody comes to visit. They really like having guys visit. The last time I went to the Cook Islands, 3 of the local hams met me at the airport and drove me to my place where I was staying. Very friendly. These guys know the area. They can tell you where to go. And oh, I forgot to bring that AC power adapter that I talked about several slides ago. They could probably help you with that. If you use a rental QTH and you'd like to go back again, great contacts for doing that. This gentleman is a recent silent key. Victor Rivera, Echo 51CG. He was one of the 3 guys that met me at the airport. We hung out together. We had lunch. Got a tour of his shack. He had me over for dinner. Just fun, really nice. Here's a guy that's not a silent key, Echo 51 JD. And I'll go back to that picture. Jim is a retired government official. As such, he gets free lunch at the good restaurants, and so do his guests. Okay, so that was nice. And I visited Jim at his house. Here's his house with a modest setup. And Jim has I believe it's an IC706 as of a few years ago. And he likes to chat. You'll find DX spots for him all the time. He likes to chat, and we'll sit and talk with you for 15 minutes if you want. Here's some pictures from my trips. Here's a little better picture of that Crank IR. That thing has been modified to use a taller fiberglass mast. It has a 30-foot fiberglass mast on it. So with the addition of the tripod, it's like 35, 36 feet in the air. If you're going to do that, you need to tell Stepper, because they need to add more wire and rope to the reels that make up the thing. And to the right of that's my 160 inverted L. Here's a little bottom view of that Crank IR. So there's a wire that goes up to the top, then it goes across a little spreader piece, then it comes back down, and you reel the wire in or out in order to match the SWR for the band that you want to be on. And then you need to do the same with the radial wire. Now that the lower reel is the radial wire for that thing. And you can sort of see the water out in the background of that picture. So I was, I don't know, maybe 100, 120 feet from the ocean. Here's the inside of my little cottage and my operating desk. And again, you see this is the same Elecraft equipment I use on every trip. And the Elecraft K3 just works. It's a good radio with good filtering. It just works. I've been very pleased with it. Here's my little cottage at Rivave in the Austral Islands. And this is the exact location where the group next month will be operating from. I mean the exact location, that exact spot. There's a whole bunch of them. So if you need the Australs, look for them next month. Here's the same Crank IR. And this is what I mean by on the north side of the island, as close to the water as you can get it. There's literally nothing in the way but water to your hot locations that you're trying to work. You might notice there's sandbags there. This was a windy location, and the wind kept blowing over crank IR, and trying to put tent stakes and beach sand is not a good idea. So those sandbags helped a lot. And just outside my little cottage, I had up an R5 vertical, which I used on the upper bands. That thing works great. Unfortunately, I did something to the interface box. I don't know, it's become intermittent. So I'm not sure what's going on with that. Here's my shack at in the cottage at Riffe. Barely enough room to fit all that equipment on there. With that, I want to thank you all for listening, and I will be absolutely happy to entertain any questions at this